We begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf Nun Aleph. We're at the bottom of the Nun Mebez, where we finish up the Agadic conversation discussing Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and his interesting discourse with Bar Kapara. Today's Daf. Something to discuss in today's Daf. After we finish that discussion with Yehuda Nasi and Bar Kapara, we move on to the next Mishnah. Continue on the theme of this parak, which is really talking about when you make a neder min hamavushal, which is the title of the parak, what do you have in mind? So we continue with other types of terminologies that there's a difference between if you say hanoidim ma'aseh gedera or hayor min hayor the gedera, because one's again like a verb, one's a noun, or between ma'aseh ilpus and min hayor ilpus. We have many of these cases that it depends on the wording that you're saying. I think someone was just speaking about a second ago about the words that you say. After davening about the words that you say, the importance of it. So also, do you say mina kavush, the preserved foods, or kavush anitayim? What the Ram's going to discuss is the difference because you don't have the hey idea, or because you're saying the word shanitayim, but you're saying it in slightly different words. It's going to have ramifications in your neder. Did you say min hashalik, the boiled foods, or shalik shanitayim? I'm not going to eat boiled foods. Min hatzali or tzali shanitayim? Min hamaliach or maliach shanitayim? There's going to be different halachas what the wordings are going to mean. Additionally, the Gemara has a distinction whether he states dag or dagim. What does that mean regarding or daga with a hey? The distinction between minatzachana, which is an assortment of salted fish, and mitar is true for cut fish. What are these things going to include in the terminology? Which again, it all comes down to the concept of nedarim halach achalosh from the adam. When you're having by nedarim, we go after the terminology of people. That's going to qualify for us what the neder is including. So we begin the current daf. Again, first we're finishing up an interesting conversation with the previous daf between the discussion of Bar Kapara and Rebbe, because it came into the conversation regarding Rebbe, because he had said when they asked him about an Eved that was sold and related to this Eved, because we spoke about an Eved that makes this egg, which we spoke about of the bear tumutu, which came in because of tavshel. It's not eaten with bread, so therefore it'd be permitted. It's not considered tavshel. So we're going to discussion about avodah making like these 1,000 types of dishes, and Rebbe was like, "Wow, I never saw this," And then we got into how wealthy Rebbe is, and not inviting Bar Kapara. And that's where we begin on 3 lines up in the bottom of the Daf Nun Mebez. Says the Gemara, "Yomei de mechoich by Rebbe." The day that Rebbe would smile, would laugh, asya put an asla alma, become punishment to the world. I guess someone told me yesterday is a Polish, I'm saying they're not supposed to be happy. If he smiles, it brings porness, it brings punishment to the world, and someone has to be upset about things, But if he smiles, it brings porness. Now, Amalei Bar Kapara, he's told the Bar Kapara, "Lo tavdichan, don't make me laugh." And if you're going to do that, v'yahivna loch arbon grivi chiti. Sounds like grieving taket, but it's I'm going to give you 40 measurements of wheat. So Amalei, so he said to him, let the master see, as you get 10 of nun aleph and aleph, the chol griva de beina. He says, whichever measurement I'm going to want, shekilna I'm going to take. So which you're telling me you're going to give me 40 measurements of wheat, I'm going to get to decide what measurement it is. So what he did was shakal de kula rabba. He took a large basket, chafye kufra. So he smeared it with clay, with lime, so that none of the wheat should fall out of the holes, like he's showing. I want to get every bit of this. And v'safa al reshe, he turned it upside down over his head, like a clown coming with this basket over his head. V'azlav Amalei came and he said to Rebbe, "Okay, lechali mar, measure out for me, the master, arbon gribichiti, the 40 measurements of wheat, deresheinabach that I lent you," which he was making a joke of his, like wearing this basket on his head. He smeared to make sure nothing leaks out, and that's he comes from the Rebbe. So Achach Rebbe laughed. So Amalei said to him, "Lava zahartach deloy tavadchen. Didn't I warn you not to make me laugh?" Amalei said to him, "Chiti dereshina kanasibna. What do you mean? I'm coming to collect the wheat that you owe me." Again, he followed through on his batchanas. Now the Gemara continues. Amalei bar kapar lebrati de Rebbe. Bar kapar said to the daughter of Rebbe, "Lemachar shatin lecham." He says, "Tomorrow I'm going to drink wine." Berikuda de avuch, with your father dancing in front of me when I'm going to drink. Uvekirkani de imach, and your mother is going to be singing in front of me. That's what he's telling the daughter of Bar Kapar. Now, however, Ben Elasha, who was chasne de Rebbe Haba, he was the son-in-law of Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, but Asher Gadol Haba, he was a very wealthy individual. So Azmne lebehilula de Reb Shimon Rebbe. He invited him So this seems to be a continuation of the story from the previous daf, that there was a big chasna Rebbe was making, and maybe it was his daughter, and maybe Bar Kapara is telling the daughter of Rebbe that by the your chasna tomorrow, your father's going to be dancing in front of me, and I'm going to be drinking wine, your mother's going to be singing for me. And the Idim was there, a very wealthy guy, this Ben Elisha, and he was invited to the chasna of Reb Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nas. So at the chasna, it sounds like Amalei Bar Kapara Rebbe. Bar Kapara said to Rebbe, "My te'eva," meaning by mishkav zachar, by homosexuality, it says that it's an abomination. So I asked Rebbe, "What's this to'eva? What does this mean to'eva?" So the Gemara tells us, "Kol Amalei Rebbe, the hachin hu to'eva." Anything that Rebbe said to Bar Kapara to explain what does it mean to'eva, Parcha Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara was able to refute that can't be the interpretation. So Amalei, so Rebbe said to him, "Parshiyat, okay, you explain." So Amalei says, "Teisi deveschi, bring in your wife, tirmeli natla, and pour for me a small cup, and for me to drink." And again, he's setting the stage over here for what he's told the daughter of Rebbe the previous day. So Asas Ramile, so she came, she poured for him, and Amalei the Rebbe said to Rebbe, "Kumru koidli de'imalach, come and dance for me, that I should tell you what is the interpretation." And Rebbe was dancing, the mother, who knows, was singing, and he's drinking a cup of wine. And Hacham Rachman, he says, this is what the Torah says. To'eva is the word Toya Ata Ba. You are straying with this, meaning you're leaving the carnal laying with a woman, and you're going to a male. So that's the word To'eva. It's a compound word. Toya Ata Ba. That's the word of To'eva. Now, Lakas Achrin, by the next cup that he gave him, Amalei Bar Kapara has another question. It says, "My table, what does it mean when it says by a woman that's engaging in bestiality, it says it's tevel? What's his tevel?" So Amalei said to him, "Ki inyan kadma," like again, like the first conversation happened again. So Amalei said to him, "Okay, avidly, do for me," meaning tans, do a little rikida, and the Amalach that I should tell you what it means. So Avad, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is dancing. Amalei said to him, "Tevel, who means tavlan yeshba? Is there any spice over here?" What does that mean? A mega zaltzen, a mega fefet, that mishanya had the biyam in kulam beers. Is this a copulation different than all other copulations? In other words, how are you leaving someone from your own species and you're going to an animal? So that's why it's tevelu is like from the word of tavlin, of spice. Is what's more spice over here? Why would you go to a behemoth? So Amalei, another question he has, and they all seem to be a similar theme. Amalei says, "Am I zima?" When the simple understanding of the pasuk is when giving one's daughter for znus, it says al tachalas bitcha lahaznaisa b'leitizna aretz umala aretz zima. The words are going to be filled with zima. What's hey zima? So Amalei said to him, "Evid, do kinyan nekadmor like he did the first time. Tans, bring me the cup of wine." So Avad, he did it. Amalei, he said to him, "You know what zima is? Zu mahi. This, what is it?" Meaning it's a terminology of doubt that we don't know from whom she was impregnated. And the Gemara in Yevama stuff, Lamed Zayin Beis explains that it's talking about a man who has relations with many women, and so to a woman that had relations with many men, and it's not known from whom did she conceive, and she gives birth to a daughter. Comes out, a father's going to marry his daughter, and a brother's going to marry his sister, because no one knows what the paternity or the maternity of the child is. And that's what it says. In other words, you're going to have the world full of zumahi, that a person's not going to know this woman that he's marrying if she's permitted him or not. That's the word zima, zumahi. Now, lo yachol ben Elisha lemizbal. The Adam, the son-in-law ben Elisha, he couldn't tolerate this conduct, this what was going on here on the chassan over here by his father-in-law. Come v'nafik hu ve'intasim mitaman. Him and his wife, he grabs his wife, says, "We're out of here. We're not staying around for this show." And he left the wedding. It's important for the Gemara to tell us this, that Ben Elisha couldn't tolerate this. Now the Gemara says, "My Ben Elisha." What does it mean? In other words, from where do we know that he was wealthy? And sometimes wealthy people maybe don't have as much tolerance as other people. But the Tan learned in the Braisa that says something interesting. Lo lechinam pizur Ben Elisha es ma'asav. It wasn't for nothing that Ben Elisha spent a lot of money. He wanted that they should show him the exact haircut of the Kohen Gadol. And some people are very particular that for what the haircut's going to be like. He wanted the haircut of the Kohen Gadol, and he spent a lot of money on that. So like said the pasuk in Yechezkel, it says Kosam Yichsemu Es Reshehem, which Rashi in Yechezkel explains that Kosam is from like Kaisemes, which the stalk is organized that one is at the start of one is by the root of the other one, meaning what does that mean to say? So as the Gemara explains, Tanu Litna Braisa, Kain Lulinas, my Lulinas, what does that mean? Some of Yehuda, it means Tasparti Yechidasa, it means a very unique and beautiful haircut. So the Gemara says, hey, what does that mean? Amar Ravi says, what happens is the way the haircut of the Kohen Gadol was, this Ben Elisha wanted this haircut too, was Reish Shalzeh B'Tzadikar Shalzeh, very interesting, that the tip of one hair on your head goes to the root of the other hair. That is very precise. There was no hair that went over the hair of another hair. Behind it, that was the haircut of the Kohen Gadol. Very interesting the way it sounds. That sounds like, the person that has the, the crossover is trying to but I'm saying, but you had just the end of one hair is touching the tip of the other hair. That was the haircut that Ben Elisha, this wealthy person, spent a lot of money on, and that's how we know that he was wealthy. Now the Gemara continues going back to the halacha of the Mishnah. Mishnah had said, if you say hanoider min hatavshel, not mavushel, say from hatavshel, we said you're going to be permitted in ubedalas haramutza. So the Gemara says, my dalas haramutza. Dalas we know is a gourd, like a pumpkin. We know that. What's haramutza? So Amar Shmuel, he says, it's kara karkuzoi. Kara is like a squash, it's like a gourd of karkuzoi, means the name of the place. And that's not considered as a tavshel. Why not? So the Mefarish says, which by us it says Rashi, the Mefarish, is because it's never really cooked very well, so therefore it's not considered a tavshel. Okay. Rav Ashi, he gives a different interpretation. He says, it's a dalas hatamuna beremetz. The word was dalas haramutza. The word remutza is the word remetz. Remetz, we all know that word when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, that regarding the gechalim, regarding when you're using a blech, but it's when you have a squash, a pumpkin that's buried inside in the remetz, inside like ashes, inside coals. That's not considered as a tavshel. So the Gemara asks on this interpretation. Says a brisa, says it says the last arames, the Aramaic squash, he dalas hamitzis is the same thing as the Egyptian squash, and therefore it's a klayim. It's going to be a forbidden mixture in Yavanis with the Greek squash, which is different, and it's klayim in ramutza. It's going to be klayim with the ramutza. Now, as the Ran explains, obviously that dalas ramutza doesn't mean ramutza because it's put into remetz, into coals. Obviously, it's a type of a dalas that's called ramutza, and therefore it's going to be a different species, and it's going to be considered kalayim with another type. So the Gemara said Tufta obviously refutes the second interpretation. Dalas ramutza obviously does not mean hatmun remetz, and therefore we're left with just an interpretation of Shmuel that it must be a certain type of karkazoi, the squash from karkazoi. And again, it's not a tavshel because it's not really fully cooked. Now, the next words says masnitin in our text of the Gemara, but like some Gemaras have an ois beis that says a pliya because this entirety of what we're quoting here as a Mishnah was already learned in the Mishnah of Mem Testament Aleph. So it would almost seem like it's just quoting it and then explaining it like we sometimes have, and not an actual Mishnah itself because we already had these words. But the words of the Mishnah were hanoidim mi ma'aseh gedera. If someone takes a neder prohibiting from a ma'aseh gedera, again that's a noun that's from describing something as something that's made in a pot, then then you're only going to be forbidden in foods that bubble, that require a lot of cooking. Depends how you define that. But Amar, if he says, I'm taking a ned that which goes into a pot, that I'm going to taste from that. So you're saying different wordings, although ma'aseh gedera is something that's made in a pot, but you're saying you're the gedera shani tayim, then asa b'chal nasa b'gedera. Then you can be forbidden whatever's made in the pot, not just ma'aseh chasa. Now Tanya, we learned in the brisa that elaborates on this halacha and goes into different cases. So if someone takes a neder from that which goes into a pot, which means anything that's cooked in a pot, challah, soup, whatever's made in the pot, so asa b'yer le'ilpas is also forbidden in that which goes into a pan, because the reason for this is, says the Ran, that the way they used to make a maisa ilpas, something that's made fried in a pan, they would first heat it up, a light heating in the pot. So if you're saying from a Yer Likadera, by default, whatever's made in the pan is also going to be included because it's first Yer Likadera before you put it into the frying pan. As the Brisa says, Shekva Yer Likadera, because it already went into the pot, before it was put into the pan. Now, let's say you take a nedim in the Yer Ilpas. Let's say the other way around. I'm taking a nedim, I'm not eating that which goes into a pan, then mutter be Yer Likadera. Then you'll be permitted what goes into a pot. That would sound obvious because obviously it doesn't go into a pot, but the Ran actually explains a bigger chiddush. He says the chiddush the Bryce is saying is, don't say that anything that was heated up, a light bubbling, light heating, in a pot to put it into a pan is already considered Yerid Le'ilpas because it's prepared for that, even though you didn't even put it into the pan yet. Kamash Malon, that not, meaning it's not even talking about somebody making in the pot. It's something that's actually made in the pan, but it wasn't in the pan yet. It went into the pot. No, it's still not in the Maisa. It's still not considered a Yerid Le'ilpas. Now, the wording here, like we're saying all along, is very important. Although we spoke about Yerid Le'Gedera, Yerid Le'ilpas, now we're going to change one word. It's going to make all the difference. Min hanasa b'gedera, not min hayur l'gedera. From that which is made in the pot, then your mutter b'nasa b'ilpas. You're going to be permitted in something that's made in the pan, because as the Ran explains, the word nasa indicates the finishing of the making. Oh, okay. Therefore, you're going to be permitted in something that's nasa b'ilpas, because even though already was in the pot, it was yer l'gedera, but still, since the finishing of its making was not in the pot, it's in the pan, that's not considered nasa b'kedera, because it's not nasa b'kedera. It's nasa, it's finished in the ilpas. Let's say you take the nedim and the nasa b'ilpas, from that which is made in the frying pan, then mutter b'nasa b'kedera, you're going to be permitted in that which is made in a pot. So the Ran explains, in other words, he says, important to understand the way he describes it, he says, even though that afterwards he puts it into a pan, it's going to be permitted, because since the Gemar B'tzasi was in a Kedera, so even though it's actually even subsequently put into the pan. So that's interesting also. You took Benanasa B'ilpas, you permitted Benasa B'Kedera, because even if when you make something in the Ilpas, sometimes you first put it, you have to know exactly what the case is talking about, but if you put it already into the pot and it was finished over there, then even though you're subsequently going to put it into the pan, and it's going to be nasa over there, no, this is considered nasa b'kedera. Another case says the Braisa, hanoida min hayer l'taner. If someone takes a neder from that which goes into the oven, ein os el pas, only be forbidden in bread, because as the Ran explains, stam, when you say yer l'taner, that means bread. But if it says kol ma'isa taner alai, anything that's made in the oven is forbidden on me, then asbachal nasa b'taner. If it's forbidden anything that's made in an oven, not just that of bread. So again, you have to know the exact wording that you say. Then Naman Bays, where we continue with the same theme, but we start a conversation about specific words, what's included in those words and how you say the words. So if someone says, I'm taking neder min hakavish, from the pickled or the preserved food, ein asa ela min hakavish al yarik. It's only be forbidden in pickled vegetables. Why? Because since he said the pickled, the preserved, it's only that which is known, and generally, pickles, right? We know what do we call pickles? It's a yerek, it's a cucumber, right? But we call that the pickle because vegetables were the things, beets, these are things that were always pickled. So if you say the pickled, the preserved, it's going to mean vegetables. But if he says kavish anitayim, that which is preserved, that I'm not going to eat, then asabachal kvushim. Then if you've been anything that's pickled, it could be herring, it could be whatever it is. Okay, so the Ran has two interpretations. He said, since he didn't mention the hay hayediyah, the hay, so it sounds like anything that's pickled. So why are we saying the word shani toyim? You look at the words in the Mishnah, it says the other version was kavish shani toyim. He didn't say with a hay, but he also said the word shani toyim, that you didn't say min kavish. So it says around, it's not to say because if he didn't say shani toyim, he wouldn't be forbidden all pickled things, because most definitely, since he said kavish without the hay, all of them are forbidden. Rather, so why are you saying shani toyim? To tell you a chiddush, that even if he says shani tam that I'm going to taste, if he says kavish, then all are forbidden. But if he doesn't say kavish, he says hakavish, then he's not going to be forbidden all these different things. And then that's how you have to explain all these cases of these mishnayos like this. But the Ram brings someone to explain that no, that the difference between hakavish and kavish is only because you're saying shani tayim. Shani tayim is added words that say I'm going to taste. That's indicating there's not going on only that of the one type that's usually pickled, but on all types, and that's how you can explain all the cases of the Mishnah. So those are two different interpretations. What's the difference? Next case of the Mishnah is min hasholik, from the boiled food. Say no, min hasholik shabbos is only going to be forbidden from boiled meat, which is generally the thing that's sholik. You have this pot of stewing meat overnight in the crock pot. That's meat that's usually stewed. Shalik shalitim. Let's say it says boiled food that I'm going to taste, not hashalik, but shalik. Then anything that's boiled is going to be forbidden. Now the Gemara asks, Amalei Rav Acha bereded Rav Avi Rashi says, Amar dik kavish mai, or dish shalik mai, or datzali mai, or dimaliach mai, heichin mashma. How's the understanding? So the Ram says, depending on what my interpretation was, that's how you're going to explain over here. So according to the first interpretation that explained the Mishnah, says the Ram, that the primary difference was if you're mentioning with the hey hayedi or not. So the Gemara's question over here is, when you say with a dalit, not with a hey, the kavish, the pickled one, dish shalik, does that sound like the hey hayedua or not? That's the Gemara's question. Or according to the second interpretation I explained, that the reason why the Mishnah says it's going to be us is because you say shani tayim. Here the question is, if you say dik kavish without shani tayim, what would be the understanding? And that the Gemara comes out, tibai, let it stand. It's not clear what dalid would mean, and we go stringently, and we're going to say that it's all going to be forbidden and asa, because a neder is a deraisa. So we're going to go lochama. Look at the next Mishnah. Let's say it says minatzli. Again, these are all similar themes about what's included in the words that you're saying. I'm taking a neder, I'm not going to eat min hatzli from the roast. So what's usually the roast? Roasted meat is usually the roast. That's the Rabbi Yehuda. Now, let's say he said tzli shani toyim. Now I'm taking a neder that roast I'm not going to taste. Anything that's roasted, an egg or whatever, it's all going to be forbidden. Let's say it says min hamaliyah, from that which is the salted thing. Say what's usually salted is usually fish. Fish are usually salted. And that's what he's saying is going to be forbidden. But let's say it says malich shani toim, anything salted I'm going to taste. Well, they forbidden anything that's salted. Let's say it says dag dogim shani toim. He says fish in the singular and fish in the plural that I'm going to taste. So asab, and then he's forbidden the fish, whether big fish or small fish, because he said two terminologies. He said dag and dagim. So the Ran explains that dag sounds like a big fish, and that's why it's in the singular, because it's sold by itself. Dagim sounds like a small. Well, we don't have fishes and fish. I mean, there's no plural in that way. We call it fish, but in Hebrew is dag and dagim. So what would be the difference? So he says because a large fish is sold by itself, so that's what dag. But small fish that are that only sold a bunch together, so that's called dagim. So if you're saying dag dagim, you're including both big fish and small fish. And bein malucha made tefillin, whether it's salted, whether it's unsalted. Bein chayim bein b'shalom, whether it's raw or whether it's cooked. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. Umutter b'taris trufa. Now, however, you're going to be permitted in chopped up taris, which a large fish that's cut up very thin slices is called taris trufa. So why are you permitted in these cut up fish? Because dag and dagim sound like whole fish, not chopped up. So if you're making a neder from dag and dagim, it's not going to be prohibited in the taris trufa into the cut fish. And for sure that you can be permitted ubit sir, with the fish sauce of the fish, which is the fat that comes out from it, and it has the fish intestines mixed into it. And for sure you can be permitted, where we're missing the word, but the Bach adds on the word, ubemurius, which the Ran explains is only the fat of the fish, only the juice of the fish, which it's what's called zuve ein tzarich lamazukatu. Meaning, I for sure don't have to tell you this, and for sure this, they're all going to be mutter, because they're not, if even cut up fish is permitted, because not the whole fish, for sure the fish brine, the fish sauce is, and if you have mixed, the intestines, for sure that's going to be permitted. Now, continues the Mishnah. Hanoidim en tzachana. What's tzachana? So tzachana was, they would have a lot of small salted fish, and some of them were chopped up, but most of them were whole. That's what tzachana was. Now the Mishnah is telling us that since in tzachana there are some cut up fish, so that's like the dish that they had, this tzachana thing. So asa b'tar is trufa. So if you took a neder prohibiting yourself from tzachana, you can be forbidden in the cut up fish because tzachana has cut up fish in it. But a mutter b'tzir b'muryas, you're going to be permitted in the tzir and the muryas because they don't have even slices of the fish. Oh, at the most it has is the intestines of the fish and the fats of the fish, but that's not going to be included in tzachana, which tzachana is at the most cut up pieces of fish. But that's not going to include the fish brine and the fish intestines. Now the last case the Mishnah talks about, hanoid de mitad is true. If someone takes a neder, prohibiting himself from cut up fish, then aser b'tzir u'b'muryas. Then he's going to be forbidden in the tzir and the muryas. So according to our girsa, the Rush explains that since he mentions Torah's trufa, that the neder was from cut up fish, so then anything that's mixed in from the species of fish would be included. So it's not only cut up fish, it would even be the fish brine and the fish intestines. However, the Ran's girsa, which actually makes sense according to the halacha that we saw right before from tzachana, sounds like, that no, if you took a neder from cut up fish, you'd be permitted by tzir and by muryas. Because, again, cut up fish is at least piece of fish, which not including the fish fats and the fish intestines. But the Ran just points out, why doesn't it mention, if you take a neder from Torah's truth, for what the halacha is regarding tzachana, which is similar, and you spoke about when you took tzachana that you prohibited with Torah's trufa. So why when it talks about taking neder from Torah's trufa, doesn't it talk about tzachana? He says because you can't say, not that it's us in tzachana, and you can't say it's muta in tzachana. You know why? Because some of it is permitted and some of it is forbidden. So you can't be black and white about it. Because since by tzachana there's whole fish and there's cut up fish, so the whole fish would be permitted because you only took a neder from Torah's trufa, which is cut up fish. But the cut up part, you'd be forbidden, like Torah's trufa. So therefore, we didn't talk about tzachana at all because part of it would be permitted, part of it would be forbidden. Now, he explains, according to his girsa, why the halacha was that you're going to be permitted in the fish brine and with the fish intestines. And he says, it was necessary to say it in the Mishnah. So he's almost going like the other way, why it's even a chiddush, like of course it's permitted. We already know this from the halacha of tzachana. He says, no, I would have thought to say that since he took a neder from taris, which is slices of fish that cut up very, very fine, so it's like almost like a hash, and therefore should be forbidden even tzir and muryas, which is how the Rush actually explains according to our girsa that tzir and muryas is forbidden. Mashmalan, that's right to tell you that no, it's going to be mutter according to the Ran's girsa because it's not really the fish piece itself; it's some derivative, and therefore that's not included. Now, Tanya will in the Brisa, Shimon ben Elazar, he adds on to the halacha of the Mishnah. He says, "Dag shani time." Someone says that I take a neder that I'm going to taste fish, and he used the word dag. So asa b'gedalim says it's forbidden in large fish because again the word dag sounds like a large fish which is sold by itself. Now the Yerushalmi explains that any fish that's less than a litra is called small, and however he says such a thing would be dependent on the places, on the location. But if it's a large fish, then it's going to be forbidden. But a mutar b'katan, you're going to be permitted in small fish because again dag means big, not small. But dagash anitayim, someone says with a hey at the end that I'm going to taste fish, asar b'katan mukta b'gadam. Then actually forbidden in small fish and permitted in large fish because daga sounds like a small one. Now dagash anitayim, let's say it says without a hey and with a hey, so then asar b'katan is forbidden both in small and big, which the Ran explains. Of course, it means both. No, he says don't say that he was retracting. That originally he wanted to make himself forbidden in large fish, so he said dag. And then at the end he says daga with a hey to say, oh, I'm backing out. I want it to be the small fish. No, he's not saying this. The reason why he said a different wording wasn't to back out, was because he wanted to make himself forbidden in both big fish and small fish. But the Gemara wants to clarify. Amalei Rav Papa Labai says, "Why did dag shani time? From where do you know that when a guy says, I'm taking a ned, I'm not going to taste dag? It means gadol, who means a large fish. Oh, because they have a pasuk in Yoina. It says, V'yiman Hashem, we know the famous story, dag gadol levloyas Yoina. Hashem prepared a large fish to swallow Yoina. And it says dag, and it was gadol. So you see that dag means large fish. But says the Gemara, because it says over there, V'yispal Yoina el Hashem lekav. That Yoina, daven to Hashem is God. Mimei hadaga, from the stomach of the daga. Didn't you tell me it was a large fish? How's he using a hay? You told me hay is a small fish. Says it's not difficult because the story has this as another part of the plot. Maybe what happened was is a large fish, the whale, whatever it was, spit him out, and then the small fish swallowed him. Now, as Ram points out, obviously the one that swallowed Yoina at the end obviously was bigger than a litra, which the Yerushalmi says is what a small fish is, but it was small relative to the big fish. So therefore we're going to call it as a small fish. It would be appropriate to call it small in relation to the great whale. But therefore it's not difficult that he was davening from the daga, because maybe he then was swallowed up by a smaller fish. But the Gemara says, no, Ella, rather I have a question from somewhere else. The pasuk says in Shemois, "V'hadaga asher b'ya'or mesa." The daga with the hay that were in the river, they died because the Egyptians couldn't drink the water from the stream because it was the first makkah of dam in all the land of Egypt. The question is, katana mesu gedom loy mesu? But only the small fish died and not the large fish? In other words, since the river turned into blood, obviously all the fish died, whether big or small. But you're telling me daga means only small fish. But it says hadaga ashabi or mesa. So you see that daga means large fish too. So rather says the Gemara, you're right. Daga mashma gedol mashkatan. The word in the pasuk of daga can mean both large and small, like we see by Makas Adam in Mitzrayim. But like we're saying throughout this Masechta, with Nedarim, halach achalash when we come to vows, we go after the way people speak. And people say dag for large fish, and daga they use for small fish, and that's where the halacha has like it. One final halacha. The Mishnah said, Someone takes a neder from tzachana, so he said that tzachana is like these whole fish with some cut-up fish. So b'chul, etc., we said that is going to be permitted in the tzir and the murius because those are not even piece of fish themselves. They're just like the fish brine and the fish juice and the fish intestines. But one question the Gemara has, I'm like Ravina Ravashi, Amar, Hariya like tzichin. He didn't say tzachana. He says, it's forbidden on me tzichin. What's the halacha? So the Ran explains the question is he going to be forbidden in tzir and murius? Although by tzachana not? But by tzichin, would he be forbidden or not? So what's the question? Because the reason why these small pickled fish are called tzachana is because the tzir that comes out from them has a very pungent aroma. It has a strong smell. Because like we find in the pasuk, and that it says in Yoel Vatal Tzachanase that the smell was very strong and it went up. So the question is, if he says tzichin in a lashon rabim, that sounds like a ribui. Like it's not just tzachana, it's tzichin. It's including something. If that would be including also the tzir and the murius, because that's really what the word tzachana really comes from. Is really from this tzir that comes out, which makes the strong smell. So although tzachana generally doesn't include it because it's specifically the fish, but that wording really comes from the brine, and you're adding on a pluralistic terminology. So then that's the question: is maybe that wording would be including tzir and murius or not? So the Gemara, to understand, it's not clear. Allah be in that case. Thank you to any time for hosting us.